Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of European UFOs. I'm your host Sebastian, and if you like this episode, then please make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps. Evidence for UFOs comes in many forms, of which official government documents are undoubtedly one of the most intriguing ones. For many years now, and in many different countries, private researchers have uncovered a plethora of files showing unarguably that there's not only a public but also government interest in UFOs. In recent years, and due to public demand, some governments have declassified at least some of their UFO files. Yet more dramatic developments may be on the horizon. As this episode is being recorded, the US is in the process of preparing the necessary legal steps to declassify government UFO records as required, if ratified, by the so-called Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act of 2023. In recent years, the UK has declassified numerous files, including drawings, letters, and photos documenting UFO activity. In this episode, we take a closer look if similar developments can be noted for Europe's economic powerhouse, Germany. The epicenter of the Cold War for more than 40 years, Germany provides a historically complex and rather unique example of government involvement with UFOs. Here with me to discuss Germany's UFO files is Andreas Müller, a well-known and highly respected researcher and journalist who's recently investigated the history of official UFO documentation in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Hi, Andreas. Really great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks a lot. I'm very good, and I'm looking forward because I've experienced your podcast just recently and very much like it. So, yeah, looking forward to a nice chat.
Excellent. Well, I've been following Grenzwissenschaften aktuell for several years now, and I have to really admit one of my favorite treats is in the morning to have a coffee and go through Grenzwissenschaften aktuell. And for our audience, could you perhaps briefly tell them what Grenzwissenschaften aktuell is, because it also leads into your background in general?
Okay, well, that Grenzwissenschaft-aktuell.de is my portal. It's a news portal about all sorts of the anomalistic phenomena and frontiers in science. That's the tradition I see myself in. I want to give all this wide spectrum of what people generally refer to as paranormal phenomena, a serious and science-based platform, which was not available, at least not in Germany, before I started that. And I cover quite a range of topics. Of course, UFOs or UAPs is one of the main topics, but I also cover typical parapsychological stuff, hauntings, ghosts, cryptozoology. But of course, I'm not reporting about, let's say, the newest YouTube video of something, but I cover studies, papers, events, or and current developments. But I'm fascinated about the phenomena. I also can admit that I, if you will, believe in the possibilities of many of them, but I'm always open and also skeptical, but skeptical as far as I see in a positive way, interested and open-minded into those topics and into the possibilities that there could be something really going on.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate both about your website and also your recent research, which we're going to talk about today, is your focus on scientific rigor, and that you don't just throw things out there, but you actually check them. And I think in the field of UAP and UFOs, unfortunately, especially online, that doesn't happen a lot. So I think it's a really good resource. So so as you said, it's really good to check out your site.
I can only take this as a compliment. Thanks a lot.
But how did you get involved with this field of anomalous phenomena? Was this just something that always interested you? So could you tell us a bit about your background? What got you involved with this?
Well, yeah, actually, as many of us, it started when I was, well, not a kid, but a youngster. And I had my grandfather gave me some books on, very popular books on unsolved mysteries. And it was summaries of the most prominent cases of all sorts, hauntings, UFOs, Loch Ness monster and things like this. And I always liked those stories. And but I always was most fascinated by those phenomena that were kind of tangible. Like I was less. I was spooked by ghosts, but not so much fascinated by ghosts. So I liked UFOs and cryptozoology because I always thought, okay, there is something that in best case could really be studied as a body or a craft or whatever. And so when I was on a Waldorf school, and on the Waldorf school in the 12th class, you do what's called a 1-year work. That's you decide the topic on your own, and you have to find a mentor out from the teachers. And I wanted to cover the topic of UFOs, but even on the Waldorf school, there was a math teacher and a physics teacher, and they didn't appreciate the topic. They said, "Oh, you cannot cover this objectively, and there's no real sources and whatever." Of course, they had no idea about the topic themselves. But by reading about UFOs when I was a youngster, I also happened to have read stories about these landing sites, which later were referred to as crop circles. And then I said, okay, this is a topic. What if you believe in it or not? But crop circles are there, so you can go and visit them, study them, measure them, whatever. And so that was in 1994 when I went for the school project to England to see and investigate crop circles myself. And I said, I would say about myself that I have a quite scientific based, inquisitive mind. And I thought that if I would see only things that are easily to be explained with boys with boards, and farmers and pranksters doing it, this would be a nice summer holiday, but no reason for me to return. And it developed completely differently after that. That was the first of more than 30 summers in the British fields, because even on this first occasion, I experienced things, I've seen things, I've learned things from, for example, farmers who told me that the crop circle phenomenon is much older than I ever read somewhere in newspapers or even in the then contemporary literature about it. And so, I saw strange stuff myself. And so I soon became one of the very focused crop circle researchers for quite some while. And I worked together with laboratories and universities to investigate crop circles. And in 2014, I curated the very first museum exhibition in a proper nature scientific museum, which is the Wiltshire Museum in Wiltshire, about the history and the research into the crop circle phenomenon. And so this was when I learned from the beginning on that what I read, for example, in newspapers or even in some books about crop circles that try to explain everything with, as said, boys with boards, that this was not the whole story, and that there was good scientific work done already on the topic. And so I thought this is interesting to see that there is a gap between what you can read in popular literature about it, and you can see on television and anything where they claim everything is man-made and a big fun, and the facts that you can actually study in the field. And so I early on I started to write about it as a journalist. I soon wrote also in Germany for quite respected journals like the Geo magazine. I think I was the first to place the crop circle article in Geo magazine, even if it's not peer reviewed. and so not a scientific journal, but it is. Yeah, it was very hard. It was like a little peer review to get that article placed in Geo and things like that. And so then I worked for a platform like mine, like Grenzwissenschaft Aktuell, that I have now, and that platform went down. And there was this time when I had to decide, okay, will I continue to do this work? Because actually we already had a lot of readers. And so that was, it was not the same as Grenzwissenschaft Aktuell, but similar. And so in 2007, I decided to take it on my own. Yeah. And since then I'm doing that, and I still have an interest in crop circles, not so much as in the past. And then with Grenzwissenschaft Aktuell, I also covered quite extensively international development in ufology and in UFO matters. And even before 2017, I realized that there is a development going on in the States, and especially, of course, with we all know the New York Times article. Yes. Things dramatically changed, and I kind of foresaw it, that there will be many questions to be answered in the near future. And I asked myself, what is a journalist, unlike me, a journalist who has no idea about UFOs, or even the normal reader, what are they doing in Germany if they want to find out about German UFO files and the political approach towards the topic? Yes. And of course, there were some articles. There was also great work has been done by others who sent in inquiries to some ministries and stuff like this before that. But there was no compilation of what was already known and what was still unknown, because in 2000 and I think it was also 14 or so, I, for example, discovered myself, with the help of Dr. Ralph Bülow, a whole, until then, completely unknown file of the German intelligence service, Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, about UFOs on the inner German border. And so, from that on, I realized there's no real proper book on that topic, and no good book with source referenced and everything. And then I decided to write it myself.
Excellent. Well, thanks for this overview. So normally at this point, I would probably ask you to go into the chronology of the UFO files and your research and what you discovered. However, we live in really exciting and kind of, ontology shattering times. So could you perhaps, as a journalist and as a professional researcher, give our audience a flavor of what the current view, both in the public and also perhaps from a more official point of view in Germany, is towards the UAP phenomenon? Because with David Rush, etc., coming forward now, what's the attitude?
Unfortunately, the attitude has not changed dramatically here in Germany, at least not from an official point of view. The ministries still claim that they are not interested in it. The government claims, as it does since decades, that there is no real interest in it. Even if I place, of course, on a regular basis, I place inquiries to our Department of Defense and things like that. But and I ask specific question about the developments that we mainly see in the United States, and I always ask things like, did, for example, German authorities participate in international meetings that the AARO had with the Five Eyes or Five Eyes Plus, which is this intelligence club, so to say, from the United States and other countries, or if they participate, or if they are some of the, in many times mentioned, international partners of the United States inquiries of AARO and things like this. And there's always a kind of a null or zero reply, which they normally try to say, oh, we are not commenting on developments and actions of other states or other parties. And if I explain to them, well, I was not asking you to give a comment on other countries. I asked you about your position or your reaction or your plans to deal about it. Then they say, oh yeah, they give you, answers like, well, of course, we're constantly talking with our international partners, but we cannot go into specifics. And so it's very unfortunate because in my book, it has more than 450 pages. I completely show that the opposite is the case, that German governments and ministries and the military have always been interested in UFOs or UAPs. For whatever reason, they were never hunting aliens or never hunting the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but there were military and intelligence and espionage reasons for example, building up this UFO files of the BND, the German intelligence service, towards the Soviet Union and the German Democratic Republic. And within those cases, I'm sure we will talk about it later, there are also very interesting and still unresolved UFO cases. UFO cases which are also interested from our perspective. But still, at the moment, we have no official body like the French do with Japan or with AARO in the United States and many other countries had. And we also never had a proper UFO project. We had smaller projects like this file of the BND, or some ministries were interested in the international development. And in general, there is also the claim or the statement by our government and military that the German military never had detected an object or a phenomena that they were not later unable to explain. Which is of course another big topic of discussion, because there are actually reasons for that being very likely true, but I think we also talk about this later.
Well, yeah.
So they are not lying, but the circumstances are created in such a way that they never will detect an unidentified aerial phenomena as long as they do not change their settings of the radar systems, which they, unlike the United States, for example, with the Chinese balloons, Germany never did. So they didn't change their radar system. So I personally think there's no conspiracy going on in Germany. I think literally there's no real interest in it. And when we try, I have very good contacts to government sources and military. For my book, I interviewed a lot of them, and it was always very good and fair and open and equal conversation, and very open. But I really became used to the idea that here in Germany, the military and politics are not aware of the consequences a real UFO phenomenon has for politics, military, technology, and society in general. So even if you show them very good cases here from Germany that happen close to an airport, they do not see the consequences such things do have on flight security. This is where you can start. If they do not understand the scientific interest, you can show them these cases and say, if you do not know what that was a real threat for air security, for flight, for business flights, for whatever. So, but even this, the awareness is not as present as in the United States. And they, at the moment, I think they try to observe, and they hope that the situation will not be like in the United States, where the topic is now. Mm-hmm. It can't become it can't get to a higher level as we are at the moment with the Schumer initiative. This stuff sits on the desk of the president of the United States now, So how can you dare to say this is a stuff for freaks and cooks and
I mean, your book is full of your requests to German officials, and I always found it, I admire your stamina, because I think after, the 10th generic lawyer-like message, like, there might be something, but actually we can't really comment on it, or we will not comment on it. And, in the most kind of lawyer-like, boring, way of saying things and actually not saying things. I think that would really frustrate me. So well done on, kind of following this up.
Well, to be honest, I think the secret is that I always try not to be a pressing and an annoying partner in communication. I do not. Even we have very very clear communication about when I got the last zero reply or null reply. I frankly wrote back and I said, listen, the thing is, this is not the real communication that we have here. It's not honest. It's not open. And what you're doing, maybe you don't see it, but what you're doing, you're feeding conspirational thinking or narratives, and none of us, not me nor you, have any interest that conspirational narratives take over. So maybe for next time, it would be very nice if you think about a more decent answer. Even if the answer would be a clear no, we have no interest in it. Even if the United States do this and that, we see it different. This would be an answer, even of course not an answer that I would be very happy with and that I would understand from content wise. But it would be an answer, and this other stuff, this is, as said, I don't know if this is an English expression, but it's a null answer, and it creates more conspiracy ideas of, they are not telling us anything, and this is so unnecessarily, they do this. These answers create this conspiration narrative without any cause. There's no reason for it to do so. And I never expected the spokesperson of the German military to tell me Germany's biggest military secrets, behind closed doors or off the record. That's not the intention. It's of course also a question of trying to bring awareness to politicians, and I'm also part of IFEX, the institute at the University of Würzburg, led by Professor Hakan Kayal. And he tries to make IFEX the kind of German Japan, so a kind of an official place where, for example, the police could report their UFO sightings, or military, or whatever. And so there are contacts into the politics and with politicians, but in many instances, one realizes, okay, they really do not see the need at the moment. They do not see that Germany gets behind the United States when it comes to these things, and not only on all levels, military wise, science wise, everything, So, and that's unfortunate. And again, it's totally unnecessarily, and it's even if you do not believe in aliens.
What about the public? Because I believe that, if enough individuals from the public come forward, it could kind of trigger an avalanche, and, there will have to be some sort of formal statement. So what is the kind of cultural flavor of this topic in Germany, in the context of what's currently going on in the States?
I mean, as in so many countries, with the 2017 report in the New York Times, things have dramatically changed. Also here, in the way that the big medias are covering the topic, where for example the magazine Der Spiegel for decades was only able to report about UFO developments with giggling and with jokes made, even if when the British published their UFO records officially through their national archives. And these were hundreds and thousands of cases. The Spiegel selected the most ridiculous cases that were, of course, also embedded in these archives. For example, a guy who claimed that his dog was abducted by aliens, and when he came back, he was just meowing like a cat. I mean, it's ridiculous. And there were cases embedded in these files from pilot sightings and radar trackings or whatever. So, but that was the stuff that the Spiegel was concentrating on. And even the Spiegel turned around and did a real good, even a cover story where they very seriously covered, for example, Hakan Kayal, the professor from Würzburg University, and other international UFO scientists and researchers and developments with all these Tic Tac and Go Fast and Gimbal videos. So we observe a change. Even the most popular science reporters from our state television. I mean, it's not really state television, but it's not private television. So like the BBC, we have here the RID and the ZDF. Even those guys who were the biggest UFO skeptics on the planet, or at least in Germany for decades, are now reporting relatively open and they're trying to get to be as neutral as possible on the UAP developments. So this has changed, and of course, with that, also the public awareness changed. There still is a thing like there's still some people who smile at you when they hear, "Oh, you wrote a book on UFOs, German UFO files. Does this exist at all?" And "Oh, how funny," and stuff. But those are now in the minority. So I think it would be time also here, and very. But the public demand is not that big as it is in the United States, and the political pressure is also even less strong. So that we have very few politicians who are, so to say, pushing the topic into the parliament, for example. There's very little movement at the moment, but also this will change, because what we are actually observing, at least in my point of view at the moment in the United States, the question about handling the UAP topic, whatever you believe the UAPs are, that's not the question, but handling the UAP topic will very likely become a big issue for the next elections in the United States. And I think, it will, with all the trouble that that Biden administration has at the moment, very low acceptance rates and everything, he is at the moment, because he is the current president, so he, what is the English expression for it? He sits on the longer end. No, what is it? So he's in the position to be active and to do things to become more open with UAPs or UFOs. So this could be the joker that he has for the next election. He could be the one to change things. And I think this is not only an idea that I make up. It is with the Schumer amendment. This has become really a serious political issue. It cannot get bigger. And in Germany, what I hear many times when I try to speak with politicians or with spokespeople from ministry or military, they say things like, well, at the moment we have other issues, referring, of course, to the unfortunate situation in the Ukraine, Others say climate change, whatever. But this can't be a reason for not to dealing with this important topic, because we are dealing even in after nights of new attacks from Russia to the Ukraine. There are other stuff that we do, so and also other important stuff. So it can't be the excuse for everything. Then it was Corona, now it's the Ukraine. There will be other unfortunate situations and crises in the future. And so we need to get over this argument. Oh, there are other topics at the moment.
And I think the legacy media have really failed all of us over the last few weeks when the David Grush story came out. I mean, it's really quite appalling, and it's a different topic, but I cannot fathom that this story and also the recent developments and also the hearings next week aren't properly being reported by legacy media. I mean, it is an insane situation. And I would also concur that whatever is going to happen in Germany or in Europe, for that matter, will largely hinge on the situation in the US. I think they need to be the forerunner, but it has to be a dual approach coming both probably from the government and from the media. And as I said, I think it's really, really sad that the media is refraining from engaging with this. And I mean, the only possible excuse I could come up with is that they're lacking the language or basic understanding to engaging with this for them probably a new problem. But then, come on, they're journalists. There's a great story there to be grabbed. They just need to do it. So
I'm in contact with some very high-ranking journalists from big medias like newspaper and outlets here in Germany. Of course, I will not name now those, but it's you're right. It is a bit of ridiculous, because what I hear, and not only from one, when I approach them and I tell them about very current situation and development in the States, they say, we heard, or our editors, we heard about it, so we are aware about it, but we want to wait and see how it develops. First, this sounds reasonable, but no, it isn't. This is waiting until something develops is not journalism. Journalism happens before that, the journalists are the ones to investigate, maybe to even expose things, to find things out, to run stories. It doesn't mean that you have to be always the fastest. That is, of course, counterproductive from a quality point of view. But saying, we are aware of the Grush story and the allegations, but we want to wait and see. This is, to be honest, this is not journalism. This is, get the guy, do an interview with him, check his background and everything. That's what journalism is. And if you find out what we know about David Grush, you need to say, okay, we need to run the story. But to be fair, after some days, and in the one or the other case a week or so, many outlets also here in Germany covered the story, or the Schumer initiative and things like this. So it's not like it was in the past that nothing happens here. And I have to admit, even if this is not my quality paper, but the biggest newspaper in Germany, the Bild-Zeitung, is doing actually in most cases a good job reporting about UAPs and UFO developments. Of course, some headlines would not be my headline, but that's the Bild-Zeitung, but the content, there is especially one journalist, Matthias Bieder. He is very much into the topic, and he writes good stuff. It's well investigated. Even if the Bild-Zeitung, people hate it, people love it, most people say they don't read it. Strange enough, everybody knows about the Bild-Zeitung stories. So they are not a bad example. Of course, Bild is not the Frankfurter Allgemeine or the FAZ or whatever, the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. It would be nice to have them as well covering the topic as decent.
Yeah, but, just in brackets for our international audience. So the Bild Zeitung is like a tabloid newspaper comparable to, for instance, the Sun or the Mirror in the UK. Just to throw in a few names to a certain degree, I guess.
Of course.
Yeah. Great. Well, and investigating actually, and what is good investigating brings us neatly to your book, German UFO Files. So could you provide a bit of context from crop circles to this? How did this project emerge?
Well, to be honest, with doing scientific crop circle research for nearly 30 years, there was a little bit time of change for me. That it's a too big topic now, but also the crop circle situation changed a little bit, and so other stuff became more interesting for me. And of course, my journalistic work with Grenzwissenschaft Aktuell, with my website, gave me a wide insight and many contacts into also other fields. And as I explained already, when I realized there was no compilation about German UFO files, and in many articles that I have read, I read, okay, there are no German UFO files, or very little, and very files that are not important, and no good cases or anything. And I realized this was not true. And then I decided to write the book on my own. And I never wanted to write a book that has already been written. I do not want to duplicate other stuff. So I was looking for a way to present the files, but also within the files, sometimes this file reporting is, of course, this is intrinsic. It is a bit dry, so to say. And I also put into the book some of the best cases from sources which are maybe where there is not an official file, but for example, eyewitness that in their own profession have some sort of official reputation, like the chief pilot, the first chief pilot of the Deutsche Lufthansa airline, Werner Utter, or even our most famous poet Goethe, who had this strange experience. And Goethe was not only a poet, but he was also a statesperson, a politician. And so there's no file on his observation, but I thought it would be nice to include this as well for the easy reading. And so I also wanted to write a book that I say this sometimes more or less as a joke. I want to write a book that you do not have to hide when there are visitors, when your mother-in-law comes and whatever. So you can leave it
which potentially is never a good situation.
No, well, in my case, it is a very good situation because I have a very good relation with my parents-in-law, and actually they helped me investigating because they both are historians. But what I mean, and this is what I wanted to have, a very source referenced file that you look through, and even as a skeptic, you cannot say, oh, what is this? And I don't believe this. Then I say, okay, look the source. And he comes to the German National Archive, to the Bundesarchiv, which is a good source. It's a scientific and credible source, and the BND is even more credible, if you will.
So how did you go about getting the information? So was there a FOIA process? Was it archival work? How did you get the information?
A kind of mix of everything. We have an equivalent of the FOIA, of the Freedom of Information Act in Germany as well, but it is not as easy accessible as, for example, in the United States, where you can, this is now, of course, the very simplified version, but you can say, please send me everything you have about UAPs written by this or that ministry or department in the time frame of this and that, or each public communication by email where the phrase UAP appears. this is something that you can do in the United States, and it's amazingly efficient. John Greenwald of the Blackwald project, he gets amazing result. This is not the way the German FOIA works, unfortunately. You need to know what you are looking for. So that is a problem if you want to look for files that you do not know if they even exist. So of course the first thing is you look in their in their list of content for the most obvious phrases and hitting words. No, that's not the so for phrases like UFOs or unidentified aerial object, flying object phenomena, flying disc, etc. And this is how, for example, my colleague, Dr. Ralph Bülow, discovered that there was this file of the German intelligence service BND. The file was still there was still a mark on the file that it was not possible to read it until 2022 or no 21. But I was already aware that it does exist, and then I tried to start an opening process even before that 30 years time until it's when it's still classified, and I was able to read into it. In other cases, it is like, for example, I not only cover Germany, I also cover Austria and Switzerland. And in Switzerland, it's funny, this was not my work, but work by other researchers, that the UFO files were not even listed as UFO files and not under UFO or flying disc or whatever, any words, but you couldn't make that up. You had to search for the term flying plates. So fliegende Teller, which maybe is a Swiss thing, but no one would have ever looked for that. And so it was a fortunate discovery. And then a whole batch of files was discovered. And sometimes it simply is luck, or we have the very first German official, so to say, UFO file from 1826 is a local file from local politicians. And this is here where it actually happened in Saarbrücken, and this is just where I live. So sometimes it simply is luck. And then you have, of course, a nice opportunity to search for the original. And so it's a hunt, and it's going through archives and listings, and
that's way more complicated than in the US from what I can tell. So are these archives, are they already digitized? So can you search a database, or is it really that you have to kind of, just by luck?
You can search databases in most cases. It's not necessarily so that they have everything digitized. So this is the other question you sometimes are left with, is this really everything that they have, or sometimes there are files that are wrongly placed, under wrong names, for example, not with intention, but just because sometimes somebody just brought them back and didn't return them properly, things like that. So, but you have a lot of digitized content that you can search. And sometimes it's research, you talk to people and they refer you to something. And so it's the good old detective stories.
Excellent. You've already mentioned it quite a few times, and by that we're jumping chronologically a bit ahead, but I think the BND UFO file is really worth exploring a bit more in detail. Could you give us a brief overview of what it contains and what its significance is?
So this is a file that's called UFO and unidentified flying object over the inner German border, which was, of course, the border between East and West Germany. And the whole file was compiled in the 80s. and with the intention from Western Germany to observe activities on the inner German border and in East Germany, which was, of course, at the end the Soviets. So this whole file was not created with the intention of investigating possible extraterrestrial life. It was similar to the situation we have now in the States, where UAPs are regarded as a potential threat for national security or military or an intelligence interest, and less than from a scientific point of view. And so most of this file, let's again say these 95%, which is I have no specific number for it, but literally most of the described cases describe something that not only I but everybody would be able to see. Okay, this was really a balloon with a camera on it, or with a espionage device, or it was even contemporary drones, which are not the quad or hexacopters of our time, the little ones. So real ballistic drones. They look like rockets and ballistics. And it's amazing to go through this through this military history also, how heavy all that stuff was at that time, and expensive and loud, and when they crashed, they had to be recovered and everything. So literally most of the cases are, especially from our perspective now, something like 30 years later, we are very easily able to explain most of the cases very rational. But as it always is, there are also cases within that are left unexplained because of a lack in information and data about it. And so they have this vague, mysterious taste to it. But there's one special case, which is, I think, finally, it is also happened to be one of Germany's most important, because best documented UFO observations. Unfortunately, we have no footage or photo images of the object, but it's very well documented for several reasons, which was an observation on the Isle of Fehmarn in 1986, where 3 and finally also a 4th official officers of the border control observed this strange object, which was that bright that it was nearly blinding them, just hovering, coming from the sea. It's in the Baltic Sea, this island, and coming from the sea, and approached the ferry station there and the police station, and it hovered something like 50 meters above them. It was not totally silent, but there was just like a humming sound.
Yeah, I found that really intriguing, because it kind of relates to a lot of other UFO cases I'm familiar with, this kind of low buzzing, humming sound. Very interesting.
Yeah, and so they observed it, and then finally it departed back over the sea and disappeared. And if you, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but if you look into all the circumstances, from my point of view, and I also contacted military experts in technology, there's nothing that you could compare it to what was used at that time. The only thing would have been a kind of an airship or Zeppelin. But then again, you would have to explain where the energy would have come from, because this thing itself was so bright that the witnesses were unable to make out a specific shape of the object. And so this was simply not the technology of that time. It was not the. I was just able to interview one of the witnesses that I found by chance, more or less by chance, because I was on German television, and he saw it, and he called me up, and then I finally was able to speak to several of the direct witnesses, and he said the sound that this object made, is as best to be compared to today's electric cars. When a Tesla or whatever starts, there's this strange. So this was this what he says. This is what comes closest to everything that he knows from other motors, and especially it was, of course, not a helicopter, and so but even more so. It was even more so of interest was that on the very same day. But I need to explain this. Of course, there were investigations have been done at the time for nearby radar stations and other military installations, and there was simply no explanation for anything approaching Fehmarn Island at that time, and then on the very same day, by chance, 300, something like less than 300 kilometers away, there was an incursion of a Soviet helicopter into West Germany territory. And about this event, where we know the object, where we know when it happened, there's also a whole file, not in this UFO file, but in another BND file that I discovered. And we know everything about this helicopter incursion. It was a big political issue at that time. We know that the way it took. We know when it entered German territory, when it left Western German territory, and we know everything. And as said, there's a whole file about it, with even the aftermath, where politicians from the East and the West met about this and discussed it, and excuses were expressed and everything. So, and this is the interesting thing. So we have two similar events caused by complete different objects. And in one case, we have literally nothing because it didn't leave any trace, but it was observed and described. And in the other case, we know everything about it, and you can very nicely compare those things against each other, and you see, okay, it's different. And even more so, the guy who wrote the report, the original report, I'm also in contact with him. He said that he's also sent out a press release to the local press, which was common for all sort of things, like with this helicopter incursion. But this press, when he sent out the press release, he was called by higher officials who took it back, who said you're not allowed to report it to the press, and he had to go through some sort of trouble to get it not published by the local press. And
it's
he
almost
said,
like Roswell.
Yeah, I know. So it's very interesting to see that the same things happened also here in Germany. And he said that never happened before and afterwards, with an event. So this is interesting, but there's also some things that I tell you now have not been published yet, because I was talking with this eyewitness. I was just able a few weeks ago, and I found this helicopter file also some months ago. This shows you how important it is to follow a story, not to leave it with one file that you discovered or one witness that you talked to. So this is a very nice example that, what needs to be done to do proper investigation, and you need a langer Atem. What is this in English?
You need a little stamina.
So to say.
Yeah.
But I just brought him actually to the train station. A very good friend of mine and colleague, Mike Siphon, he is the one who created the new Society for UAP Research. And we talked about it, and we realized that in this case, we always have this question about how credible are eyewitness accounts, and about the quality of anecdotal evidence compared to factual evidence. And I realized in our discussion that we had, that in this case, these four officers of the border patrol and the guy who wrote actually the report, they are not classical UFO witnesses, because what they observed and what they reported in their report, they didn't report a flying saucer or anything. They just reported their usual duty. They also told me that at that time they were unaware that what they observed was literally an unidentified flying object. They just described as what they usually do, an event. They were not reporting it as a UFO, and that makes it this makes the whole story even more so interesting, because you cannot say, oh, they try to describe it to make themselves interesting or anything. They were just technically reporting something that the four of them observed from different vantage points. And so if we are precise in that discussion, there are no classical UFO witnesses, even if there are, but they became UFO witnesses even later, or later when we reviewed the case. So that is a fascinating, completely new facet of this whole event, which is very important, I think.
Was there any attempt on the part of the BND, apart from giving a report within the file, to interpret the phenomenon, what they witnessed, either in terms of military intelligence or just a general comment as to what it might have been?
No, the report states that there was no explanation for it, because there were no further data, which is, of course, some skeptics might say, okay, this is the lame part of it. But these four witnesses themselves confirm each other, and if one would doubt this case, you need to doubt also other cases in this file where skeptics are very happy to accept that they are a ballistic drone. So you cannot choose free out of your personal choice here. The interesting thing is that in the report itself, the author of which, with whom I'm in contact, of the report, who wrote the report, who was not a direct witness, but he spoke with the direct witness at that time, and he was also the guy who made the contact to them for me. In the report, he demands, or he requests to be informed about any further development or any further insight into this, and that never happened. And that was actually also the stuff that made him kind of not angry, but a bit of annoyed, because that he never got a reply about it. And I've combined with this redaction of the press release. I think it's a fascinating facet that, as we see, because we have this comparison with the helicopter incursion at the same day, hours later, there it was not the case, and this was a literal threat, because this was not only a simple helicopter, it was a fighting helicopter, an armed helicopter. This was really something. This would have been an event that you in the review of today, you would have understand if they would say, "Oh, we cannot report about that." This would show our weakness at the border control and everything. But they didn't.
It does seem, and this is perhaps a bigger topic we can at least superficially address now, it does seem that the East-West topic plays a big role in all these files to a certain degree. And so I think what's also quite interesting for our audience to understand is how in the GDR the entire UAP topic was handled, because there's a super interesting chapter in your book dealing with the kind of ontological status of UAPs in the GDR, and it's something I wasn't really aware of. I mean, I was brought up in a different country, anyways, but so in the West, but it's fascinating that this topic was completely scapegoated in a way. Could you perhaps elaborate a bit on that? How?
To be honest, I'm not the expert in that, because that chapter in my book is not been written by myself, but by Dr. Andreas Anton, who, I think this was his, I don't know if this was his thesis or anything for his PhD, but he wrote a whole academic book about the paranormal in the German Democratic Republic. So he is really the guy to talk to, and I can strongly recommend him being a next guest for your podcast. But yes, I mean, he shows in this chapter, and even more so in his very extensive book, that topics like UFOs, but not only UFOs, but the whole range of paranormal phenomena was regarded as something to put it in my simple terms, as a non-academic. Well, I'm not a non-academic, but I have no PhD, and so I'm, let's say part academic. So in my simple terms, the paranormal issues, of course, they were experienced by the people of the GDR, but it was not not something that the government really liked, and they called UFOs something like a stupidity of the West, and an attempt to undermine the public interest in real serious stuff. So it was like the communists said that religion is the opium for the public. A similar approach. The GDR had a very I don't know if this is an English word. Andreas Anton would know much better. Scientistic way of public life, of politics. A more scientific approach to it, and they thought even there were very few books on it, but even those books who were printed in the GDR explained UFOs away as an illness by the sick spirit of the West and of the compromised West and everything. So, but also from my crop circle research, I know that crop circles existed in the GDR or were discovered, but there were attempts made. People said, you do not really want to go into these things because it was not nice to be even called a crazy at that time, so to say.
No, and so what happened then with UFO sightings in the GDR? I mean, I think probably the most famous one is the Greifswald incident, just as the Iron Curtain collapsed, more or less. So was this something that was then kind of taken up in the public awareness? And is there a file on this? Because it's quite a big case, probably the one of the best known ones.
Okay, of course, it was not a file of Eastern Germany anymore, because Eastern Germany did not exist anymore. There's also a chapter within the book that has been written by Marius Kettmann, who is an historian, and he tried to find traces in the files, so to say, in Soviet files, because there's this idea that the Greifswald lights or the Greifswald objects, which were filmed by and seen by hundreds, maybe thousands of tourists, because it was seen from the coastline at the Baltic Sea. So it was very visible from cities like Greifswald or from the island of Rügen and things like that. There are hundreds and maybe thousands of witnesses, and we have many photos and even early video footage of it. So that it was there very early on. There was the idea that it could be flares, military flares from the Soviets, which is a theory that has been followed by some, but we still cannot prove it because it was, of course, understandably due to the political situation, it was a bit of chaos at that time, and no one really knew who was responsible for what. And the Soviets were withdrawing, but were still present and active. And so we have confronting claims from researchers and from it's a matter of who they have talked to, if the scenario of flares is legit or not. And so this was covered quite extensively, but not anymore by the German Democratic Republic bodies and institutions. But there were other cases beforehand, and we also searched. Not only this is very important for me. I'm not the first researcher who did research into UFO files in Germany. There were others as well who, like Illobrand von Ludwiger, Robert Fleischer did stuff. So there are many others which I also credit and quote in the book. But there are, for example, cases and files from the intelligence service of the former GDR, the Stasi, the Staatssicherheit, but very little UFO cases. Some cases where are in the files and are described, one over Magdeburg, for example, but it is not more than just very basic descriptions. In another instance of a UFO file from the Stasi, it is more or less a collection of press clippings from how West German news outlets reported about the event. So there was nothing of no substantial takeaway from these files. There were more like newspaper clipping collections than anything else.
And I think this actually brings us to two really important points you make towards the end of the book. And one is that, is the sample of files we have in Germany representative of everything that might have been documented? And if I understood correctly, given the political situation, that probably at this moment isn't the case, because it might not be in Germany, because the East was more or less a satellite state of the Soviet Union, and likewise the West was heavily under the influence of the Allies. So so the question more or less is, have attempts been made, or is this something you would kind of have on your mind in the future, to look for German-related UFO cases in what is nowadays Russia, if that's at all possible? I have no idea. It might be possible in the US with Project Blue Book, and I think there's even a reference to that, or even a chapter to that in your book, where you look for German cases in Project Blue Book.
Yeah. As you just mentioned, I also have a chapter on the German cases, or there's even Swiss cases mentioned in Blue Book. And that shows you that there were these cases not only reported by the public, but also taken serious by the United States Air Force UFO investigators of that time. And of course, those files do not appear as a German file because, as you said, Germany was in the 60s, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, was under heavy influence, and not we were, so to say, in many cases, especially in military and intelligence cases, not master of our own home. And so we see with the Blue Book files that reports went to Washington, or more likely to Washington than to Berlin, for example, or to Bonn. Not talk about Bonn at that time. So it's very likely that that important observations and maybe discoveries, maybe even when we now live in the post-Grush era, we talk about wreckage recovery operations, that they were not sent to the Max Planck Institute for Materialforschung for material sciences, but they were sent to whatever lab in the United States, or even more so to Moscow or something. That is very likely, and not only likely, but as shown. Sorry to repeat myself, but with the Blue Book files, it was actually even factually the case. And I also show in the very first time in a publication a memorandum from the Bavarian military government from 1945, I think it is. I have to look it up again, but very early on, where Germany was totally under the military and political control of the Allies, and Bavaria was governed by the United States Corps. And this is an inquiry or a demand from the American government to report all UFO sighting, especially, funny enough, it's a quote, especially those of flying discs, to back to Washington immediately. So here we have it black and white on official documents that this was actually not only the case, but also the duty of the officers, and I guess not only of American or English or French and Russian officers, but also of those German equivalents in later times to report things of special interest, to Washington or Moscow than to Bonn or Berlin.
And just on a slight tangent here, because I'm sure our listeners are going to ask, have there been rumors or any sort of anecdotes about crash retrieval operations, exotic materials within Germany ever, or is this something we just can't comment on because there is no evidence?
This is something that I have to admit is not covered in the book. Actually, I'm writing on the second part already, where this will be covered. There are some rumors about crashes on German territory. There's one rumor, of course, that something crashed near Ramstein, and another thing that something crashed in the Northern Sea. But as you just mentioned, it's I was unable so far to find out more about it. It seems not to be more than rumors and fancy reports about it, but it's nothing of substantial quality at the moment. But that may change. I try. There may be some possibilities to do FOIAs in the States. And as John Greenwald is a colleague of mine, so we will see how that develops. But this is, of course, an interesting idea, because it is very likely, especially under the political situation in Cold War, that if something crashed and if the Americans had this crash retrieval program, that they would have also brought it to the States. But as said, there's no substantial evidence to it. The files are silent, so to say. There is this German expression, die Akten schweigen, which is, of course, also the very same case. And not only are the files quiet, but they really shut their mouths when it comes to ideas of German Nazi developments as an explanation for the UFO phenomenon. This is an afterwards fantasy, where there is really, I really went into archives. I went to those people that were in charge who were actually in charge of the development program of the Nazi regime to build new weapons, to test new technologies. You can go wherever you like to people. And I mean, Werner von Braun is only the biggest, most well-known name. There are others who were more important than Werner von Braun, believe it or not, but who had real insight into everything about all sorts of weapon development departments in the Nazi regime. And no one of them talks about flying discs like the Reichsflugscheiben myths. So, and I was really, I was open to the possibility, because who knows, and I would have reported about it, but I could not confirm all these online rumors. They show these fabricated images from, in my point of view, and even some photographs of alleged documents, but
it's something I never really followed because it didn't really interest me that much. But I just remember that a few years ago, this story with like Nazi flying discs was huge, and it just seemed I don't know, always had a bad gut feeling about this. So I never really followed up on it, but yeah, it's great that you did. So.
Yeah, I said, this gut feeling should of course, even if it's understandable, but it should never be the basis for the decision to investigate something or not. And I know there are other authors who claim the opposite, but and also there are also other authors who have researched it even more extensive than I did. Andreas Kramer from the GEP, for example, he wrote an own book about it, and there's even a new book that came out, I think, last year about the Reichsflugscheiben mythos, which is this myth about the secret German flying disc development. And none of them part of them are very good, very professional academic historians who had even more, spent even more time into the archives. And I think as it was with me, I was open for the idea, because I never do want to exclude something, even if I had my gut feeling by reading all these alleged claims. And it was always this thing like, those were these Nazi veterans, and they reported after the World War. It's always this narrative. Oh, if we would have had 2 more weeks or 2 more months, then we would have won the war, because then we would have had the Wunderwaffe or the atomic bomb, and everything would have been great. And yeah, I mean, this is understandable from their point of view, to live their life that they had and everything. But as said, up until now, all file sources that you can properly investigate are silent. And so I think there's no flesh and bone to this myth.
Yeah. No, well, great. Thanks a lot. I'm really glad we went on this little tangent, because I'm sure it would have come up in questions later anyway. So thanks a lot. So in concluding, because you've already been very generous with your time, there are 2 final issues. One you already addressed actually at the beginning, and I just want to kind of zoom in on the future a bit. And this is the kind of, how technology works, and are we actually, or is the German government military actually looking for UFOs? Because as we've seen with the, supposed balloons in the US, they then kind of turned their radar up a notch, and all of a sudden they do see things. So do we know anything in Germany? Has there been any sort of adjustment? Has something leaked? Do you know this? Or?
Well, I specifically asked this to the German Ministry of Defense, and they said they did not adjust their radar. It's even funny enough, because in my book, based on the work that has been done by the unfortunately just recently departed or deceased, very important and pioneer of German UFO research, Illo Brandt von Ludwiger, that we know that our radar, as well as the Americans, and we heard it also from Australia, for many decades they were adjusted in such a way that they could hardly detect any objects that were behaving in, let's say, exotic ways. And it's so to explain it, I try to do it very fast. If you imagine a radar screen, you see this finger going around like a clock. And if there's a detection, the computerized system creates a space where, under all circumstances that we understand and know, so normal planes, helicopters, drones, and everything, we know how fast they can be in a maximum and in a minimum thing, what kind of trajectories they can follow. And so the system creates a foreseeing where this target should appear when in the next round, when the finger goes another round. And if the object does not appear, it creates a wider space where this object should appear in the next round. And after 3 rounds or 4 rounds, if the object does not show up in this expected space, the signal will be deleted from screen to keep the screen readable, so to say. And this is not something to cover up your UAPs or UFOs, but it has a very technical and very very basic reason to, as said, to keep the screen readable and manageable, which is of course fine when you want to track objects that you know of. But as soon as there are objects who, for example, suddenly stop in midair, which a plane cannot do, or flies a 90 degrees angle, zigzagging away, or flying or speeding up faster than Mach 3 or maybe 4, 5-ish, whatever, then these objects will be deleted as well. So if German military claims that they never detected a UAP that they could not later explain, that could be the truth in a way, because they cannot detect them. And they openly admit that. Not only the German, but also Austrian military representative admitted that. And of course, there's nothing to admit, because it actually is factual knowledge and science. So the Americans, they changed that in the face of the so-called Chinese balloons. And I would really like to stress this, because especially in German media, you still hear when they report about it that not only was the first big balloon a Chinese balloon, but also that the other shot down objects were balloons as well. And, you know, like it or not, this is simply not true. The public, until this day, does not know what these objects were. If they were balloons, which is possible, which I do not want to exclude, but claiming they were all balloons is simply not based on what has been published so far. And so they changed, as you explained, their data settings, and suddenly they even admitted that they see more of these strange things. They adjusted their radars to that an extent that they now can track slower and much faster objects flying at higher altitude and maybe even lower altitude. I'm not sure about that, but with more exotic trajectories. That's a hard word. Trajectories than they have been able before. And I asked, I said, the German Department of Defense, and they said, well, we did not change our settings, and we see no reasons to do so. There's no further explanation why our most military potent and powerful partner, the United States, are doing something, detecting objects of national security interest, and we don't see a reason for doing so. That's still, to me, a mystery, and I cannot fathom, again, not from a scientific point of view, not from a military point of view, not from an intelligence point of view. I mean, what would happen if, for example, let's keep in the current imagery. Russia develops a missile that flies Mach 8, and it hits Berlin. And in the aftermath, they say, well, we couldn't foresee that because our systems are not adjusted for for cases that we did not foresee. It's ridiculous. Of course you need to be prepared, even if it is not from space, even if it is from a foreign from a foreign country. We need to be prepared for first contact, and again, from all sorts of things, from scientific point of view, political, social society point of view. There's no reason for not to be prepared.
No, completely with you there. And speaking of preparation, do you, because you're involved and you have lots of sources, do you have a suspicion there might be German whistleblowers, because we live in an age of whistleblowing and revelations? Would you make any informed suggestion that this might happen after what might be unfolding in the US, that people here in Germany might be coming forward? Or
I don't think to that extent as we see it in the United States, because I really have the feeling that we never had projects like Blue Book or anything. We had, even in German military, I found a file from the Bundeswehr, which is the German army, a UFO file, but this was more or less a newspaper clipping collection, or other files where they try to get some sort of an overview and insight into the current state of international events and positions of other countries. I have the feeling there never was a bigger UFO project. Of course, I could be damn wrong, but I think this, as we discussed already, due to the political situation that we had until the mid-90s, other countries were in charge for things like this. What I know of is that we had high-ranking officials from the Department of Defense, the army bodies, and also in science or in air traffic, who are and who have been very credible UFO witnesses, like Werner Utter, who was the very first, after the war, the very first chief pilot of the German Lufthansa, as well as the chief pilot of the Austrian Airlines. And in my book, I also cover a case of a near downing of a German military helicopter. And this, the crew of this helicopter is known to UFO researchers, and the guy who wrote the report, he was part of the crew, and at that time, he was, I can say that much, he was a very big figure in German army. So I will not say his name, because he has to decide this himself. But so there are these big names, so to say, who could come forward as well, maybe not of whistleblowers, because there's no whistle to blow, but with their stories and with their experiences. And then people would wake up and say, wow, that is amazing, that people like him or her are going public with their observations, which would still would be anecdotal evidence. But I'm one of the school, from that school, who do appreciate even anecdotal witnesses and evidence as an important part. Maybe, of course, not as tale-telling as a radar signature, but people and humans are also sensors, sometimes very good sensors. Of course, it is our duty as researchers to find out if credible or not, and to what extent. But so I can tell also from the feedback that I get that there are sometimes people, and the public would wonder who has seen UFOs and is not telling it publicly. And I mean, this is internationally, but also where we now see people like Gary Nolan, for example, even if he now has become a UFO figure, 5 years ago, he was no UFO figure. He started to investigate this little mummy and things like this, but everybody only knew him from his very academic profession at where is he? Is it Harvard?
Stanford.
Yeah. Stanford, yeah. And he already then he told me when we had a conversation that this experience go back within his family. So this is a story that he now publicly tells that he didn't at that time. And when he told me that, and he said he's telling this in confidence to me, I really thought, wow, if you are going to tell this to your colleagues, they would go crazy, And now we have people like Avi Loeb and even Professor Hakan Kayal. He's a very, very important figure, and for the development in Germany, for the respect and the reputation that the topic got and became, not only in the public awareness, but also especially in the media here in Germany. So he's doing very important work, even if he is relatively, public-wise new to the topic. But his interest, this is something that he also expressed in interviews into the topic, was because his father was a direct UFO witness. And he said there's no reason for him to doubt his father telling the truth. So yeah, no real, to make a long saying short, no real whistleblowers. I don't think that this will happen, but yeah, very interesting public figures could come up and admit, okay, we are experiencers or whatever you want to call it, witnesses or believers and everything. So that could be interesting.
Well, that's a very exciting note to close on. So thanks, Andreas. You've been super generous with your time. I can wholeheartedly say I very much enjoyed this. And, as someone who worked in academia, I can really only commend you on your work because there's so much rigor and scientific scrutiny behind it. I know how much work it is to put together a book that's actually reliant upon historical sources and to vet them and so on. So really, bravo, excellent work.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And so could you perhaps repeat where people can find you? And I will definitely also include that in the description so people can click on the links.
Well, you can, of course, find my book in all bookstores and Amazon and whatever. Andreas Müller and UFO Akten, that should find it. Even the new book, which is the prologue to Deutschland's UFO-Akten, which is Deutschland's historische UFO-Akten, translating to Germany's historic UFO files, starting in the 8th century and dealing with some well-known but other yet completely unknown cases that were described in documents in the centuries after until 1900. And of course, you can find my unfortunately, it's only in German, my news website, which is www.grenzwissenschaft-aktuell.de. That's hard for English-speaking
I will
readers.
put it in the description.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
So that may help. And I think this is the place to find me. And
excellent, lovely. Thanks a lot, Andreas, and hopefully talk again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.